The fluorescent lights of the Walgreens pharmacy hummed overhead as Catherine Morrison stood frozen in the vitamin aisle, staring at a bottle labeled Women's Health 50 Plus. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up, turned it over, read the label promising stronger bones, sharper minds, better sleep for women in their golden years. Golden years. When exactly had she crossed that invisible line? When had she stopped being Katie, the girl who rode a midnight blue Kawasaki down Highway 101 with her hair whipping wild in the Pacific wind, and become this? A woman standing alone in a drugstore at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, her shopping basket containing only vitamins, frozen dinners for one, and a bottle of wine she'd drink by herself. 58 years old. The number felt foreign in her mouth. Kate placed the vitamins in her basket and moved toward the checkout, passing a young couple laughing over some shared joke, a mother chasing a toddler down the cereal aisle, a teenage girl texting with the urgency of someone who believes the world is listening. None of them looked at her, not a single glance. She had become background scenery in other people's lives. 6 months ago, Kate had retired from 32 years as a registered nurse at Portland General Hospital. They threw her a party in the break room, served grocery store cake, gave her a plaque with her name misspelled. 3 days later, her badge was deactivated, her locker cleaned out, her parking space given to someone else. The hospital continued without her, seamless as water closing over a stone. She drove home that day to an empty house. Had been driving home to an empty house for 3 years now, ever since James died. The memory struck without warning, the way grief always did. Not the sick James, not the skeletal stranger who spent his final 6 months wired to machines, but the real James. Her James, the man who used to ride behind her on that Kawasaki, his arms wrapped tight around her waist, his laugh loud in her ear as they took the curves too fast, invincible and young and so very alive. Cancer took him on a Tuesday, stage 4 pancreatic, diagnosed too late. She'd quit riding the day he got sick, sold the motorcycle to help pay for treatments that didn't work, traded her leather jacket for scrubs that smelled like hospital disinfectant, became the caretaker she needed to be. And now he was gone, and she was still here, 58 years old, buying vitamins for women in their golden years. Kate paid for her items and drove home through streets she barely saw. Her apartment, a small one-bedroom she'd moved into after selling the house she and James had shared, felt smaller every time she walked through the door. The silence pressed against her ears. She put the groceries away, poured a glass of wine, and sat at the kitchen table, where her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. Beth, always busy, always urgent, always somewhere else. The text read, "Mom, call me when you can. Important." Kate dialed. Beth answered on the first ring, her voice clipped and professional, even in crisis. "Mom, it's Grandpa Frank. He's gone. Massive stroke. The hospital called me this morning. He didn't suffer." Kate felt the words hit her chest, but they didn't penetrate immediately. Shock arrives first, a numbness that delays the pain. Her father, Frank Morrison, 85 years old, stubborn as iron, living alone in that cabin up in the Cascade Mountains because he refused to rot away in some old folks' prison. When? Kate heard herself ask. 2 days ago. They found him in his workshop. I'm flying in tonight. Don't do anything until I get there, okay? I'll handle the arrangements. Don't do anything, because Beth handled things. Beth was a corporate attorney in San Francisco, successful and efficient and always in control. I should come up to the cabin, Kate said quietly. Start going through his things. Mom, you don't need to do that. Let me hire someone. You shouldn't be dealing with all that clutter by yourself. I'm what? A pause. You're retired now, Mom. You should be resting. Resting. Code for, you're old now. Act like it. I'll see you at the service, Beth. Kate hung up before her daughter could protest further. The funeral was held 3 days later at a small cemetery outside Bend, Oregon, where the pines stood tall and the wind carried the scent of sage. Fewer than 20 people attended. Frank Morrison had outlived most of his friends, and the few who remained were frail themselves, leaning on canes in each other. Beth arrived in a black suit that probably cost $1,000, her husband David beside her looking uncomfortable in the September heat. Michael, Kate's son, drove up from Texas with his wife and two young children, who ran circles around the grave markers while the adults pretended to mourn appropriately. The service was brief. A pastor who'd never met Frank read generic verses about eternal rest. Kate stood beside the casket, her hands folded, her eyes dry. She'd cried all her tears for James. Her father's death felt different, distant, like a door closing on a room she'd stopped visiting years ago. After the burial, after the awkward small talk and the limp sandwiches at the community center, Beth cornered her in the parking lot. "Mom, we need to talk about the cabin." "What about it?" "You inherited it. The will's pretty clear. But honestly, what are you going to do with it? It's old, it needs repairs, it's 3 hours from Portland. You should sell it. Use the money for retirement. Maybe look into one of those nice assisted living communities. There's one near me in Marin County." "I'm 58, Beth. Not 80. "I know that, Mom. I just think you should be practical. You're living alone now. What if something happens? What if you fall? Or—" "I'm not an invalid." Beth's expression softened, but only slightly. "I know you're not, Mom, but you've been through so much. You lost Dad. You retired. I just want you to be safe." Safe. That word again. The cage built from good intentions. "I'll think about it," Kate lied. "Michael and I can help clean out the cabin next month. We'll get everything appraised, organize an estate sale. You don't have to do any of the heavy lifting." Kate nodded, said the things Beth wanted to hear, and watched her daughter drive away in a rental Mercedes that gleamed like disapproval. Michael stayed behind, gave his mother a long hug. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, his voice gentle in the way James's used to be. "I'm fine, sweetheart. You know Beth means well, right? She's just worried about you." "I know. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all." He kissed her forehead and left, his children already asleep in the back seat of his SUV, everyone moving forward with their lives while Kate stood still in a cemetery parking lot, watching the sun set behind the mountains. She drove to her father's cabin that night, alone. The road wound through dense forest, the headlights cutting narrow paths through darkness so complete it felt solid. Kate knew this road by heart. She'd grown up in that cabin, spent her childhood running wild through those trees, learned to ride a dirt bike on the trails behind the property. Her mother, Ruth, had taught her. Fearless Ruth, who rode like the wind and died too young in a car accident. Kate hadn't been back to the cabin in 3 years. Guilt settled into her stomach as she pulled into the gravel driveway. Her father had lived alone all that time, declining invitations to move to Portland, rejecting offers of help, insisting he was fine. The cabin looked smaller than she remembered, a modest A-frame structure with a sagging porch and windows dark as closed eyes. Kate retrieved the spare key from under a flower pot that held only dead soil and let herself inside. The smell hit her first. Old coffee, motor oil, sawdust, and solitude. The furniture sat exactly where it had always been. Her father's reading chair by the fireplace, its leather cracked and worn. The kitchen table where they'd eaten countless meals. The walls covered in photographs, most of them faded, curling at the edges. Kate moved through the rooms like a ghost. In her father's bedroom, she found his clothes still hanging in the closet, his reading glasses on the nightstand beside a library book he'd never finish. She picked up the glasses gently, held them to the light, and felt something crack inside her chest. When she set them down, her hands were shaking. She spent that night on the living room couch, unable to face the drive back to Portland in the dark. Dreams came in fragments. Her mother's laugh, James's arms around her waist, the roar of an engine and the feeling of flight. Morning light woke her early. Kate made coffee in her father's ancient percolator and carried it outside to the porch. The September air was crisp, carrying the promise of autumn. From where she sat, she could see the garage at the edge of the property, a weathered structure her father had always kept locked. The garage. Kate set down her coffee cup, her heart suddenly beating faster. As a child, she'd begged to go inside, pressed her face against the dusty window, tried to peek past the curtains of cobwebs and mystery. But Frank had always said the same thing. Some places stay locked for a reason, Katie girl. Katie. He was the only one who'd ever called her that. She went back inside and began searching drawers. In the desk in his bedroom, beneath stacks of bills and old photographs, she found it. A heavy brass key on a leather string with a tag tied to it in her father's neat handwriting. For Katie, when you remember who you were before you became who you had to be? Dad. Kate read those words 3 times. Before you became who you had to be. The key felt warm in her palm as she walked across the dewy grass toward the garage. The padlock was rusted but intact. She turned the key. The lock gave way with a groan that echoed across the yard. The door creaked open, and stale air poured out, smelling of dust and oil and forgotten dreams. Kate flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through darkness to reveal shapes covered in canvas tarps. Motorcycles, 6 of them, lined up like sleeping soldiers. Her breath caught. She moved forward slowly and reached for the nearest tarp. With a gentle tug, she pulled it back. Beneath it sat a 1951 Vincent Black Lightning, its black enamel dulled by time, but its curves still bold and beautiful. She moved to the next one. A 1965 Triumph Bonneville, her mother's bike. Kate recognized it immediately, remembered Ruth polishing the chrome until it gleamed. Next, a 1972 Harley Shovelhead, then a 1988 Kawasaki GPZ 900R in midnight blue, and Kate's knees nearly gave out because she knew this bike, had ridden this bike, had owned this bike 30 years ago before she sold it to pay for James's medical bills. Her father had bought it back, had kept it all these years, maintained it, preserved it, waited. On the seat of the Kawasaki sat a manila envelope with her name written on it. Kate picked it up with shaking fingers and opened it. Inside was a letter, written on lined paper, the ink slightly smudged. Katie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I wasn't better at saying things out loud. Words never came easy to me the way engines did. But I need to tell you something now, even if it's too late. Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She gave up racing when she got pregnant with you, because that's what everyone said she should do. Her mother, her friends, even me. We all told her it was time to be responsible, to think about the baby. She did it because she loved you more than anything in this world. But I watched a piece of her die when she hung up her helmet. She never said it out loud, never complained, but I saw it in her eyes every time she looked at these bikes. When she died, such a stupid, random way to lose someone so alive. I locked this garage because I couldn't stand to see what we'd taken from her, what I'd taken from her. Then you grew up, and you were so much like her. It hurt to look at you sometimes. Fearless, wild, free. You rode like you were born to it. And I was so proud, Katie. So damn proud. Then James got sick. And I watched you do the same thing your mother did. You sold this bike. You put away your dreams. You became who you had to be. I understood. That's what love does. It makes us sacrifice. But James is gone now. Has been for 3 years. And you're still living like you're waiting for permission to be alive again. So here's my permission, if you need it. Live, Katie. Ride. Feel the wind on your face, and remember who you were before grief and duty convinced you that you were done. You're 58. If you're lucky, you've got 20 or 30 years left. Don't waste them waiting to die. This bike is yours. It's always been yours. I just kept it safe until you were ready to remember. I love you, Katie girl. I always did, even when I didn't know how to say it. Dad. Kate read the letter 3 times. Her vision blurred by tears she didn't try to stop. Then she folded it carefully and sat down on the concrete floor of the garage, her back against the Kawasaki. The sobs came from somewhere deep in her chest, from a place that had been locked tight for so long she'd forgotten it existed. She cried for her father, for her mother, for James, for 30 years of becoming smaller and quieter, for the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, and the decades she'd lost somewhere in between. When the tears finally stopped, Kate stood up slowly. Her body ached, knees stiff, back protesting, reminders that she wasn't 25 anymore. But she wasn't dead, not yet. She walked around the garage, examining each motorcycle. Her father had maintained them beautifully. The tires were rotated regularly, the engine still oiled, the chrome polished. This wasn't a collection gathering dust. This was a promise being kept. Beneath the workbench, Kate found a small metal box. Inside were ownership papers, insurance documents, and appraisal letters from auction houses. The motorcycles were worth nearly $2 million collectively. Beth would want her to sell them, would call it practical, responsible. Kate closed the box and set it aside. That afternoon, she drove back to Portland. She called Beth from the road. "Mom, I was just about to call you. David and I have been looking at some wonderful retirement communities. I'm keeping the cabin, Beth." Silence then. "What?" "I'm keeping it. I'm not selling." "Mom, that doesn't make any sense. What are you going to do with it? You can't maintain that property by yourself. I'm what, Beth? Say it. You're not getting any younger, Mom. I'm just trying to help you make smart decisions. I found something in Dad's garage. A collection of motorcycles. They're worth about $2 million. Another silence. $2 million? Mom, that's incredible. We need to get them appraised properly. Find the right auction house. I'm not selling them. What? Mom, you can't be serious. Do you have any idea what you could do with that money? Beth, I need to go. I'll call you later. Kate hung up before her daughter could argue further. Her hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was something else. Something that felt almost like courage. Back in her apartment, Kate poured herself a glass of wine and sat at her kitchen table, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Beth. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened her laptop and searched for something she hadn't thought about in 3 decades. Women's motorcycle clubs in Oregon. The results surprised her. Dozens of groups, many specifically for women over 50, who were returning to riding after years away. Forums filled with stories from women like her, widows, divorcees, empty nesters, all asking the same question. Is it too late to start again? Kate read their stories late into the night. Women who'd given up riding to raise children, to care for sick parents, to support husbands' careers. Women who'd woken up one day at 50, 60, 70 years old and realized they'd forgotten how to do anything just for themselves. One post caught her attention. "I'm 63. My husband died 2 years ago. My kids think I'm crazy, but I just bought a motorcycle. I haven't ridden since I was 28. I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of spending the next 20 years waiting to die." Kate closed her laptop and looked around her small apartment. At the furniture she'd bought because it was practical. At the walls bare of photographs because looking at the past hurt too much. At the life she'd built that felt more like a waiting room than a home. She made a decision then, sitting alone at her kitchen table at 2 in the morning. She didn't know if it was brave or foolish, but she knew she couldn't keep living like a ghost in her own life. The next morning, she called a number she'd found in her father's address book. A man answered on the 3rd ring, his voice gruff with age. "Hello? Is this Daniel Cross?" A pause. "Who's asking?" "My name is Kate Morrison. I'm Frank Morrison's daughter. I think you used to ride with him. And with my mother, Ruth." The pause stretched longer. Then quietly, "Katie? Little Katie?" "Not so little anymore. I'm 58. A soft laugh. "Aren't we all? I'm 62 myself. Still feels like yesterday we were all young and stupid, racing bikes and thinking we live forever." His voice grew gentle. "I heard about Frank. I'm sorry. He was a good man. Did you know about the garage? The motorcycles? I helped him maintain them. Once a month for 30 years, I'd drive up there, and we'd work on them together. He never stopped believing you'd come back to them, Katie." Kate's throat tightened. "I don't know what to do with them." "What do you want to do?" The question was so simple, so direct, it knocked the breath out of her. What did she want? When was the last time anyone had asked her that? "I want—" Kate stopped, started again. "I want to ride again, but I haven't been on a bike in 30 years. I'm not even sure I remember how." "The body remembers," Daniel said quietly, "even when the mind thinks it's forgotten. Come up to the cabin this weekend. Bring the Kawasaki. I'll meet you there." "I don't know if I can—" "Katie, can I tell you something your mother said to me once?" "Okay." "It was right before she found out she was pregnant with you. We just finished a race. She'd won, of course. She almost always won. and someone asked her what she loved most about riding. You know what she said? Kate shook her head even though he couldn't see her. She said, "When I'm on that bike, I'm not someone's daughter or someone's girlfriend. I'm just Ruth, pure and whole and free, and I get to decide where I'm going." Tears spilled down Kate's cheeks. "Your mother gave that up for you," Daniel continued. "Not because she had to, because she wanted you more than she wanted freedom. But Katie, you don't have to give it up. Not anymore. What do you choose?" Kate wiped her eyes. "I'll be there Saturday, 10 a.m. I'll bring coffee, the good kind." Saturday arrived wrapped in fog that clung to the mountain roads. Kate drove to the cabin with her stomach in knots, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. She'd barely slept, had almost called Daniel a dozen times to cancel, but she didn't. Daniel's truck was already parked in the driveway when she arrived, a battered Ford that looked older than Kate felt. The man who climbed out was tall and lean, his hair completely silver, his face weathered by years outdoors. But his eyes were kind, and when he smiled, she could see the young man he'd been. "Katie," he said simply, and pulled her in a hug that smelled like coffee and motor oil, and something that reminded her of her father. "Thank you for coming," she said when he released her. "Wouldn't miss it. Now let's see if we can get that Kawasaki running." They worked together in the garage for the next hour. Daniel had brought tools and fresh oil and a battery that would actually hold a charge. He moved around the bike with practiced ease, explaining each step. "Your dad and I got her running about 6 months back," he said, checking the carburetor. "He knew he didn't have much time left. Wanted to make sure she was ready for you?" Kate's vision blurred. "He knew he was dying?" "Suspected. He had some chest pains, wouldn't see a doctor. But yeah, I think he knew." Daniel glanced up at her. "He talked about you a lot. Was proud of you, Katie. But I think he worried you'd forgotten there was more to you than what you did for other people." "I did forget," Kate admitted quietly. "Well," Daniel straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Let's see if we can help you remember." He rolled the Kawasaki out of the garage and into the clearing behind the cabin, where the morning fog was starting to burn off. The bike gleamed, its midnight blue paint catching the light. Kate stared at it like it might bite her. "I don't think I can do this," she said. "You don't have to. You can walk away right now, sell these bikes, move into a nice safe retirement community, and spend the next 30 years being careful. There's no shame in that, Katie." "But," he smiled, "but your mother would have called that a damn waste of a perfectly good life." Kate laughed despite herself, then felt tears threaten again. "Okay," she said. "Okay, what do I do?" Daniel handed her a helmet. Her mother's helmet, she realized. It still fit perfectly. "You remember how to start it?" Kate's hands moved before her mind caught up. Key in the ignition. Clutch pulled in. The engine roared to life, and the vibration traveled up through her body like an electric current, waking something dormant. "Good," Daniel said over the engine noise. "Now, nice and easy. Just take it around the clearing. You don't have to go fast. Just see how it feels." Kate eased the bike forward, her body remembering what her mind had forgotten: the weight of the machine, the delicate balance required, the way the throttle responded to the slightest twist. She rode slowly at first, circling the clearing. The bike wobbled. She nearly dropped it twice. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. But she didn't stop. She made another circle, then another, each one a little smoother, a little faster. The muscle memory flooded back. Shift here, lean there, trust the bike. And then, without planning it, without thinking it through, Kate opened the throttle. The Kawasaki surged forward, and suddenly she was flying. The wind rushed against her face. The world blurred at the edges. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than grief. She felt alive. When she finally stopped and killed the engine, she was crying and laughing at the same time, her whole body shaking. Daniel walked over and steadied the bike while she climbed off on trembling legs. "How'd it feel?" he asked. Kate pulled off the helmet, her hair wild, her cheeks wet with tears, her eyes bright. "Like I came home," she said. They sat on the cabin's porch after that, drinking the good coffee Daniel had brought. The silence between them was comfortable. "What happens now?" Daniel finally asked. Kate watched the light move through the trees, thinking about her empty apartment in Portland, about Beth's text demanding she be practical, about the 30 years she'd spent becoming smaller and quieter. I have an idea, she said slowly, but I don't know if it's brilliant or completely insane. Those are usually the same thing. What is it? My mother gave up racing because everyone told her she had to, because being a mother and being a racer couldn't coexist. Kate set down her coffee cup. I want to show women like my mother, like me, that we don't disappear after 50, that we can still ride. What are you proposing? A rally, here at the cabin, for women over 50 who want to ride again, or who always wanted to ride but never had the chance. Free, open, just a space where we can remember we're still here. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Your mother would have loved that. What do you want to call it? Kate thought about the letter her father had written, about her mother's sacrifice. Ride for Ruth, she said. A memorial rally. For my mother. For everyone's mother. For every woman who gave up pieces of herself and never got them back. When? 6 weeks. First Saturday in November. That's not much time. I'm 58 years old, Daniel. I don't have time to waste. He laughed and raised his coffee cup. To not wasting time. And to Ruth, who never wasted a single moment. Over the next 6 weeks, Kate became someone new. Or maybe someone old, rediscovered. She reached out to women's riding groups across Oregon and Washington, posting about the rally on forums and social media. The response stunned her. Within days, 50 women registered. Within 2 weeks, over 100. Women from Seattle and Sacramento, from Boise and Salt Lake City. Women in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Women who'd lost husbands, lost themselves, lost the thread of who they'd been. Their stories poured in through emails. I rode until my kids were born, then sold my bike because my husband said it was too dangerous for a mother. I'm 63 and just got divorced after 40 years. I don't know who I am anymore, but I know I used to love riding. My wife died last year. We rode together for 30 years. I can't remember the last time I felt alive. Kate read every message, responded to everyone. They weren't just looking for a place to ride. They were looking for permission to exist again. Beth called repeatedly, each conversation more tense than the last. Mom, this is insane. You're organizing a motorcycle rally? At your age? What if someone gets hurt? I'll be careful, Beth. That's not the point. The point is... Beth stopped herself. Say it, Kate said quietly. You're not 25 anymore, Mom. You're almost 60. This isn't you. Maybe it is me. Maybe you just never knew this part because I spent 30 years being the person you needed me to be. The silence on the other end was thick with hurt. Then Beth's voice, small and scared. I'm afraid you're going to die. I'm afraid I'm going to lose you like I lost Dad. And there it was. Fear. The same fear that had made Ruth put down her helmet, that had made Kate sell her Kawasaki. Oh, honey, Kate said gently. I'm going to die eventually. We all are. The only question is whether I'm going to be alive before it happens. Beth hung up and didn't call back for 3 days. But Michael did. Mom, Beth's losing it. Says you're having some kind of crisis. I'm 58, Michael. If this is midlife, I'm planning to live to 116. He laughed. Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I am worried. Not because I think you're old or incapable, just because I love you. I know, sweetheart, but bad things are going to happen regardless. The question is whether good things get to happen too. Will you at least take a safety course? Promise me you won't do anything stupid? I promise I'll be as careful as I can be while still actually living. I guess that's all I can ask for. He paused. For what it's worth, I think Grandpa Frank would be proud of you. Kate's throat tightened. Thank you, baby. I'm coming to this rally. Sarah and the kids, too. I want to see you ride. The weeks flew by in a blur of preparation. Daniel helped her clear the property, mark out safe riding routes, set up first aid stations. Women from nearby towns volunteered to help with food and parking. The local news ran a piece about the grandmother organizing a women's motorcycle rally in memory of her racing champion mother. The attention brought more women out of hiding. Women who'd thought they were the only ones feeling invisible, the only ones hungry for something more than quiet resignation. 3 days before the rally, Beth showed up at the cabin unannounced. Kate was in the garage when she heard the car pull up. She emerged to find her daughter standing beside a rental car, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual suit. No David, no lawyer face, just Beth, looking younger and more uncertain than Kate had seen her in years. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. This is a surprise." Beth looked around at the rally banners Daniel had hung, the portable toilets being delivered, the riding course markers. "You're really doing this." "I'm really doing this." "Can I see them? The collection?" They walked inside together, and Kate watched her daughter's face as she took in the 6 bikes. "They're beautiful," Beth said quietly. "Your grandmother rode that one." Kate gestured to the Triumph. She was 23 years old, racing against men twice her age, and she beat them. Every single time. "I never knew that about her. You never told me." "I didn't know myself until I found her journals. She gave it all up when she got pregnant with me." Beth was quiet, running her hand along the Triumph's seat. "I don't want you to give up anything for me, Mom. I never wanted that." "I know, honey, but I did. We all do. Women have been giving up pieces of themselves for generations." "Did you resent it? Resent me?" "Never. Not for a second." Kate moved to stand beside her daughter. "But I did lose myself. Somewhere between being your mother and James's wife, and my patient's nurse, I forgot I was also just Kate. And when James died, I realized I didn't know who that person was anymore." "So you're trying to find her again?" "I'm trying to remember she existed in the first place." Beth turned to face her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry I called you crazy. I'm sorry I tried to make you small and safe. I was scared. I'm still scared." Kate pulled her into her arms. "I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of wasting whatever time I have left." They held each other in the quiet garage while dust motes danced in the sunlight. When they finally pulled apart, Beth wiped her eyes and said, "Teach me." "Teach you what?" "To ride. I want to learn. I want to understand what this feels like." Kate smiled through her own tears. "It would be my honor." The first Saturday in November dawned cold and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt like a gift. Kate woke before sunrise in her father's cabin, her stomach a tangle of nerves and excitement and hope. By 8 a.m., women started arriving. They came in trucks and cars, on bikes they'd pulled out of storage, or borrowed from friends wearing leather jackets that smelled like mothballs and possibility. Some arrived alone. Some brought daughters, sisters, friends. All of them wore the same expression. Part fear, part determination, and underneath it all, a hunger that had been starved too long. Kate stood at the registration table, greeting each woman by name. These weren't strangers. They were reflections of herself. Linda, 66, whose husband had died 5 years ago and who hadn't left her house except for groceries since. Maria, 58, newly divorced after 30 years of marriage, looking for a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Susan, 71, whose children had forbidden her to ride, but who'd come anyway, her eyes blazing with defiance. By 9 a.m., over 90 women had gathered. The clearing buzzed with nervous laughter and the rumble of engines being tested. Daniel moved through the crowd, offering advice and encouragement. Michael arrived with his family, his kids wide-eyed at the sight of so many motorcycles. Even Beth was there, standing off to the side, watching her mother with something that looked like respect. At 10 a.m., Kate climbed onto a makeshift platform and looked out at the sea of faces turned toward her. For a moment, the old fear crept in. Who was she to do this? Just a retired nurse who'd spent most of her life being quietly competent and invisibly useful. Just a widow who'd barely remembered how to ride 6 weeks ago. But then she thought about her mother, hanging up her helmet, about her father, keeping these bikes running for 30 years, about all these women gathered here, hungry for permission to be more than what the world had told them they were allowed to be. She gripped the microphone and began to speak. "My mother's name was Ruth Morrison. She was born in 1941, which means if she were alive today, she'd be 83 years old. When she was 21, she entered her first motorcycle race. The men laughed at her, told her she should go home, that racing was for men, that she'd get hurt, and it would be her own fault for trying to be something she wasn't. She won that race. and the next one, and the next. For 4 years, she was one of the best riders in the Pacific Northwest. Not the best woman rider, the best rider, period. Then she got pregnant with me, and everyone, her mother, her friends, even my father, told her it was time to stop, time to be responsible. So she hung up her helmet and never raced again. She died when I was 28 in a car accident, and I found her journals years later, and I learned that a piece of her died long before that crash. It died the day she decided that being a mother and being a writer couldn't coexist. I inherited her gift and her curse. I rode until I was 28. Then my husband got sick, and I sold my bike to pay for his treatment. I became a full-time caretaker, a nurse, a mother, a widow. I became all the things I needed to be for other people, and somewhere along the way I forgot I was also allowed to be myself. My father died 6 weeks ago, and when I cleaned out his garage, I found something I never expected. He'd kept my bike, maintained it, waited for me to come back to it, left me a letter that said, "Remember who you were before you became who you had to be." So I'm here today to remember, and to help all of you remember too. Because the world tells us that at 50, at 60, at 70, we're supposed to disappear. Supposed to be quiet and safe and grateful for whatever scraps of life we're allowed. We're supposed to step aside, stop taking up space. But I'm 58 years old and I refuse to be erased. I refuse to live like I'm waiting for permission to exist. This rally is called Ride for Ruth. It's for my mother, who gave up her dreams, but it's also for all of us. For every woman here who spent decades being who other people needed her to be. For everyone who's forgotten what it feels like to be wild and free and unapologetically herself. Today we ride, not because we have to prove anything, not because we're trying to recapture our youth or deny our age, but because we're still here, still breathing, still alive. And being alive means more than just having a pulse. It means feeling, wanting, choosing. It means taking up space and making noise and refusing to be forgotten. So let's ride for Ruth, for ourselves, for every woman who was told she was too much or not enough or past her prime. Let's ride and remember that we're not done yet, not by a long shot. The applause started slow, then built like thunder. Women cheered and cried and hugged each other, and Kate climbed down from the platform with her hands shaking and her heart pounding. Daniel met her at the bottom, his eyes shining. "Ruth would be so damn proud of you right now." Kate couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just nodded. They rode in groups of 10, taking turns on the course Daniel had mapped out. A gentle loop through forest roads and open meadows. The sound of engines filled the valley. Kate rode with the first group, and as she felt the wind against her face and the vibration of the Kawasaki beneath her, she understood something. This wasn't about going fast or proving anything. It wasn't about being young again. It was about choice. About deciding that she still got to want things, still got to pursue joy, still got to be someone other than the sum of her losses. It was about existing again, fully, loudly, unapologetically. The day stretched into afternoon. Women who hadn't ridden in decades conquered their fears and completed the course. First-time riders wobbled and laughed and discovered muscles they'd forgotten they had. Stories were shared over lunch. Tales of bikes sold and dreams deferred, and the particular grief of realizing you've spent years being someone you barely recognize. But there was joy, too. So much joy. The kind that comes from doing something just because you want to, because it makes you feel alive, because you've decided you're allowed. Beth found Kate in the early afternoon, after she'd completed her third run. "Can I talk to you?" her daughter asked. They walked away from the crowd, toward the edge of the property where the trees grew thick. "I owe you an apology," Beth said. "A real one." "Honey, you don't—" "Let me finish, please." Beth took a breath. "I've spent my entire adult life being successful and in control. And when Dad died, I couldn't protect you from that. I couldn't fix it. So I tried to control everything else. Tried to make you safe and small because at least then I wouldn't have to worry about losing you too." Kate reached for her daughter's hand. "But watching you today," Beth continued, her voice breaking, Seeing you up there giving that speech, watching you ride, seeing all these women come back to life, I realized I was trying to protect you from the very thing that makes life worth living. I was trying to keep you safe from being alive. You were trying to keep me safe from dying. But Mom, we're all dying. Every day we're all dying a little bit. The only question is whether we're living too. Kate pulled her daughter into her arms and held her while they both cried. I want you to teach me to ride, Beth said when they pulled apart. Really teach me. I want to understand this. Are you sure? It's scary at first. Beth smiled through her tears. I'm terrified, but I think that's the point. As the sun began to set and riders started to pack up, a woman Kate didn't recognize approached her. She was perhaps 75, tiny and frail-looking, with white hair and hands that trembled. Thank you, the woman said simply. Did you get to ride? Kate asked. The woman shook her head. I can't anymore. Arthritis. But I brought my daughter. She's 52, lost her husband last year, hasn't smiled in months. Today she smiled. Because of you. Kate looked at the daughter who waved shyly from across the clearing and saw her own reflection. The same grief, the same slow awakening, the same tentative hope. I rode when I was young, the older woman continued. Gave it up to get married, have kids, do all the things women were supposed to do. And I've watched my daughter do the same thing. Give up pieces of herself to be a good wife, a good mother. Now her husband's gone and the kids are grown and she doesn't know who she is anymore. But today she rode and she remembered. The woman squeezed Kate's hand. That's what you did here. You helped us all remember. Thank you for being brave enough to remember first. By the time the last rider left, the sun had disappeared behind the mountains. Kate stood in the clearing, exhausted and exhilarated, surrounded by tire tracks and the fading smell of exhaust. Daniel appeared beside her, 2 bottles of beer in hand. He offered one to Kate, and they stood in comfortable silence watching the stars emerge. How do you feel? He finally asked. Kate thought about it, about the terror and joy of the past 6 weeks, about watching 90 women rediscover pieces of themselves they'd thought were lost forever. I feel like I just woke up from a very long sleep, she said, and I'm not sure what happens now, but I know I don't want to go back to sleepwalking. So don't. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. It's just not easy. Kate smiled at that. No, not easy, but maybe necessary. They finished their beers as the night deepened. Eventually, Beth and Michael emerged from the cabin, and the 4 of them stood together under the stars. And for the first time in 3 years, Kate felt like she was part of something larger than her own grief. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at the cabin. No return address, just a postmark from Portland dated 30 years earlier. Kate opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a small box wrapped in faded tissue paper and a note from the Postal Service explaining that it had been held in storage per the sender's prepaid instructions to be delivered only after Frank Morrison's death was registered with the county. Her father had planned this decades ago. Inside the box, Kate found a photograph she'd never seen before. Ruth Morrison, 8 months pregnant, standing beside the Triumph Bonneville, wearing riding leathers and a helmet, her hand resting on her swollen belly. The date on the back, May 1966. Beneath the photograph was a letter, written in her mother's handwriting. Katie, darling, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've grown up. I hope you don't hate me for leaving you without knowing who I was. Today I hung up my helmet for the last time. Everyone says I'm doing the right thing, that racing while pregnant is selfish, that children are responsibility, and responsibility means sacrifice. And they're right. I love you more than I've ever loved anything, including racing. I would give up anything for you. But Katie, I want to tell you something that no one told me. Loving someone doesn't mean you have to disappear. I'm putting away my dreams because I believe that's what good mothers do. But I'm also afraid that one day you'll do the same thing, that you'll meet someone, have children, build a life, and somewhere along the way, you'll forget that you were a whole person before you became someone's wife, someone's mother. So I'm writing this letter and asking your father to keep it safe, to give it to you when I'm gone, and you're old enough to understand. Don't make my mistake, Katie. Don't think that being a mother and being Ruth, being yourself, can't coexist. Don't let anyone tell you that you have to choose between loving others and loving yourself. We're allowed to be both. We're allowed to exist fully, completely without apology. I learned this too late. I'm hoping you'll learn it in time. If you ever have a daughter, tell her this. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit into other people's comfort. You don't have to be quiet to be good. You don't have to disappear to be loved. Tell her that her grandmother rode motorcycles and won races and was fearless and free. Tell her that I loved you enough to give that up, but I wish I'd been brave enough to teach you that I could have been both, a mother and a rider, a caretaker and a free spirit. Tell her that women don't have to choose. We just have to be brave enough to believe we deserve everything. I love you, Katie. I loved you before you were born. I'll love you after I'm gone. Ride for both of us, my darling girl. Ride like the wind. Mom, Ruth. Kate sat on the porch of her father's cabin and read the letter 5 times. Then she pressed it to her chest and let the sobs come, not the painful tears of grief, but something deeper, something that felt like healing. Her mother had known, had seen the trap and walked into it anyway, out of love and fear and the weight of everyone's expectations. Had spent 23 years hoping Kate would be braver than she'd been. And now, 30 years later, sitting on this porch at 58 years old, Kate finally understood what both her parents had been trying to tell her. You're allowed to exist, fully, completely, without permission. That evening, Kate called Beth. I need to show you something, she said. Can you come up to the cabin this weekend? Is everything okay? I think everything might actually be okay, for the first time in a long time. Beth arrived Saturday morning. Kate showed her the photograph, read her Ruth's letter. They sat together on the porch, 3 generations of women connected by words written before Beth was even born. Grandma Ruth wanted you to tell me this, Beth said quietly, touching the letter, about not having to choose. She wanted me to tell my daughter. I think she knew I'd have a daughter. And you did tell me, today. Just took a while. Beth smiled. Do you think she'd be proud of what you did with the rally? I think she'd be relieved that the cycle finally broke, that someone finally chose both. Both what? Both love and freedom, both sacrifice and self, both being there for others and being there for yourself. Kate put her arm around her daughter. Your grandmother gave up everything for me. I gave up everything for you and your father. But you don't have to give up anything for anyone. That's what she wanted me to teach you. Beth was quiet for a long moment. I already did, though. I've been so focused on my career, on being successful, on proving I could make it in a man's world, that I forgot to actually live. I forgot to be happy. Then maybe it's not too late to remember. Is that why you're teaching me to ride? Kate smiled. I'm teaching you to ride because you asked, but I'm hoping you learn more than just how to operate a motorcycle. What else is there? That you're allowed to want things just because they make you happy, that you're allowed to take up space, that you're allowed to exist loudly and fully and without apology. Kate squeezed her daughter's shoulder. Your grandmother never got to learn that. I learned it at 58. Maybe you can learn it at 32. They spent the afternoon in the clearing, Kate teaching Beth the basics. Michael arrived with his family for dinner, and they ate on the porch while the children ran wild in the yard and the adults talked about everything and nothing. Before Beth left that evening, she hugged her mother tighter than she had in years. Thank you, Mom. For what? For showing me that it's not too late to remember who you are. 3 months later, Kate stood in front of a crowd of 300 women at the second Ride for Ruth rally, triple the number from the first one. She announced the creation of the Ruth Morrison Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to teaching women over 50 to ride, funded by the sale of the Vincent Black Lightning. The bike had sold at auction for $1.2 million, and Kate had kept every other motorcycle, turned the garage into a teaching space, transformed her father's cabin into a place where women could come to remember who they were. Beth had taken a leave of absence from her law firm and moved to Oregon to help run the foundation. She still wasn't entirely comfortable on a bike, but she rode anyway. And Kate, who'd spent 30 years being invisible, who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something just for herself, led rides every Saturday with a growing group of women who decided that age was just a number and life was just beginning. But before all that, before the foundation and the second rally and the transformation of the cabin into something bigger than a building, Kate did one thing more. 1 month after receiving her mother's letter, she drove to the cemetery alone on a cold November morning. She carried Ruth's racing helmet and a thermos of coffee. She sat on the grass beside her mother's headstone, weathered granite that read simply, Ruth Morrison, 1941-1989, she rode like the wind. Hi, Mom, Kate said quietly. I brought your helmet. Thought you'd want to know it still fits me. The wind moved through the pines, carrying the scent of rain. I did it, Mom. I rode again. And I taught 90 women that they don't have to disappear, that they're allowed to keep existing. Kate traced her fingers over her mother's name. I found your letter, the one you wrote when you were pregnant with me. And Mom, I'm so sorry. Sorry it took me 30 years to understand what you sacrificed. Sorry you never got to ride again. Sorry you died thinking you had to choose between being Ruth and being my mother. Her voice broke. But I'm going to make sure every woman who comes to our rallies knows. You don't have to choose. You're allowed to be both. The world will tell you otherwise, but the world is wrong. She sat there until the coffee went cold, until the sun broke through the clouds, until something like peace settled into her bones. I love you, Mom, and I'm riding for both of us now. Every single day. On her 59th birthday, Kate woke before dawn and rode Ruth's Triumph to the coast alone. She'd made this ride a ritual, the same route her mother had raced in 1964, the same Highway 101 curves that had once meant freedom. She parked at a lookout point and watched the sun rise over the Pacific, the engine ticking as it cooled. 59 years old. A widow, a mother, a grandmother. But also, Katie, the girl who'd ridden like lightning, the woman who'd forgotten and then remembered. She pulled out her phone and saw messages from the foundation. 47 women registered for next month's rally. A grandmother in Texas asking if 76 was too old to start. Beth sending a photo of herself on a bike with the caption, "Getting braver, Mom." Kate smiled and put the phone away. She thought about James, who'd loved her fierce. About Frank, who'd kept her dreams alive in a locked garage. About Ruth, who'd sacrificed everything and left behind a letter begging Kate not to do the same. And she thought about all the women who'd written to her, who'd shown up to rallies, who'd decided that being alive meant more than just breathing. They'd created something together. Not just a riding group, but a movement, a declaration that women over 50 weren't done, weren't invisible, weren't ready to disappear. Kate climbed back on the Triumph, settled into the seat that had held her mother's body decades ago, and felt the engine rumble to life. She didn't know how many years she had left. 20, 10, 30 if she was lucky. But she knew this. She would spend every single one of them living, not waiting, not hiding, not making herself small. She gunned the throttle and headed north on Highway 101, the wind wild in her silver hair, the sun warm on her face, her mother's spirit riding beside her. Still here, still breathing, still alive, and nowhere, nowhere, near done.